Meeting of the Transportation Policy and Planning Board for February 28th, 2022. We do appear to have a quorum. I have received word that our elders are all in a different meeting, so some of them may be a bit late. So we'll get started. Reva, if you would please call the roll.
Grant Foster, Keith Furman, Barbara Harrington McKinney, Randy Udell.
Here.
Christopher McCahill.
Here.
Carolyn McAndrews.
Here.
Tom Wilson.
Here.
Baltazar Deanna Santana.
Here.
Margaret Bergamini.
Here.
And Badrinath Lankala.
Thank you, Reva. We do have a quorum, so we are in order. Jesse, if you would then please proceed with our standard virtual meetings opening statement.
All right, welcome to our Transportation Policy and Planning Board meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video for the purposes of quorum and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists, that is alders, board members, and staff, have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. You use raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email list in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. All right, approval of minutes from our February 14th, 2022 meeting. Assuming all board members have reviewed those if they so chose. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Chris, thank you. Is there a second? Second by Randy, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of approving our minutes from the February 14th, 2022 meeting, please unmute yourselves and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. Chair believes it's unanimous. If you'd like to register a no vote, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised. Okay, one abstention. Thank you, Margaret. All right. Passes with one abstention. Are there any registrations for public comment for items not on the agenda?
I have nobody registered.
Thank you, Reva. Are there any communications, disclosures, or recusals from members of the board? Seeing none, we will move on to our first item for the evening, Legistar 70115, Parking Division Name and Mission Review.
Yeah, I'll give a little background on that and then share my screen. Sabrina Tolley was our parking manager, and we appreciated her contribution to the city. And so now we're going to recruit for a new parking manager. And I think the mayor thought that this might be a good time to just review, do we have the right name for the parking division? Do we have the right mission for the parking division? Because we, as we recruit, we will kind of get the types of candidates that maybe are interested in our mission, right? And so I did some phoning around, looking at other parking divisions, and I'm going to share my screen. This is in a Legistar, but if we just start with the division name, right now our parking division was called the Parking Utility, and I think with the creation of the Department of Transportation, it just moved to the Parking Division because we're not a utility in the true sense as defined by Wisconsin statutes. But then as I phone other places, some have different names for their parking division. the International Parking Institute changed their name to the International Parking and Mobility Institute. Now, they just completed that change maybe about 3 years ago. And the reason they did it is they wanted to broaden the function of it. They said that basically that the mobility can encompass such tasks as curb management, alternative commuting methods, and data collection. And those are all things that I think we want our division to move into. I fall in the Oakland Division of Parking and Mobility, and when I talked to that director, he said they put the words "and mobility" because they wanted the parking division to realize that they had not only a function in the parking supply, right, but also in the parking demand. And I thought that was kind of an interesting comment, you might say, or perspective. San Francisco Parking and Curb Management. Their name includes "and curb management" because they also seek to manage curb management. In fact, they have a policy document on curb management that is just exceptional. And hopefully, as a policy board in the coming year or so, we might move to create a document such as that. Sacramento Parking Services is, I'm going to say, is perhaps a little bit more traditional parking that is focused on parking supply. However, their operation is well run, and we can learn from their operation as well. So my recommendation is that we consider adding the words "and mobility" in the division name, just to broaden it, to remind, our next division director, as well as, high-level managers, that it's more than just running garages, right? We have a role in transportation demand management and reducing VMT. So I've talked with what would need to be done for this. I think this particular one eventually would require changes in the ordinances. However, I will say that our parking division has been functioning under the name Parking Division for 3 years, and there are still many ordinances that still use the word parking utility. So this could be a more of a long-term thing, or the attorney's office could do a blanket resolution. But since this is the Planning and Policy Board, and this is kind of a policy question in that it kind of, what is the role of our parking division, and how should we portray that role to the public and to our employees? And so at this point, I'd like to open this part up for discussion, and then the next part, we talk about the mission, but why don't we start with this part?
Comments or questions? What Tom's shared so far? I don't see any hands up, Tom.
All right. Okay. And this is perhaps, then we move on to the division mission, which is perhaps provides more guidance on what the mission should be. This appears to be more flexible, does not require any ordinance changes. Our current parking division mission is as follows. The mission of the parking utility is to provide safe, convenient, and affordable parking to the city's residents and visitors, consistent with city transportation policies. And this is not necessarily a bad mission. In fact, I'm going to highlight it just so that it can be easily seen. But there's a few things in it that's it doesn't convey. One, it uses the word affordable parking. And maybe we want affordable parking, but maybe that shouldn't necessarily be a goal, right? appropriately priced parking is one of the greatest drivers in mode shift, right? And in fact, we can say that one reason why our Metro Transit has, a pretty good ridership is because people have to weigh the cost of parking versus the cost of other types of transportation, and so having the true cost of parking be borne by those who are making transportation choices is maybe okay. It doesn't talk about access to employers and businesses in the mission statement. Curb management or street parking management is not mentioned in the mission statement. Sustainability measures such as transportation demand management are not in the mission statement, and the PEO, which is parking enforcement officers functions, are not in the mission statement. So a recommendation for this, and this can be done both by, initiated by department staff, and I've talked this over with members of the parking division, but also this is, in many ways, this is a policy decision, right? That's maybe fits into the board's function. The Parking and Mobility Division manages Madison's on and off-street parking supply to support sustainable transportation choices while providing equitable access to Madison businesses, events, and residents. So with this revised mission statement, we incorporate sustainable transportation choices, which broadens the mission to include TDM, electric vehicle charging, and bike storage. We are about to introduce a transportation demand management ordinance, and so then the staff that would enforce or administer that ordinance could be, housed within the parking division. Manages Madison's on and off-street parking supply, broadens the mission to include having a role in curb management, providing equitable access, which provides the challenge of how to make Madison's downtown more accessible to all of Madison's residences. And then I guess business events and residents, which recognizes that parking seeks to serve all the activities that occur downtown. So one note that some of the division staff wanted me to make discuss is that the word affordable is removed. Okay, and so and when we remove the word affordable, that has an equity impact, right? It's one thing for a person to go downtown and pay. The tech facilitator has their hand up. Jesse?
Go ahead, Jesse.
That seems to be an error. I'm not even supposed to be able to raise my hand, so sorry about that.
We'll ignore it for now then. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyhow, if we talk about affordable, it's one thing for a person, let's say, in one of our neighborhoods that, provide affordable housing for people with less, than median incomes. There's a difference between paying $6 for parking and $16 for parking, right? So there's a little bit of tension there, right? We want our downtown to be accessible to people with lesser means, but if our parking's $4 or $6 a day, then it just really kind of promotes car use by the majority of the people going downtown. So at that point, I think I'd like to open this up for discussion.
All right, any questions or discussion about this next section? Chris, go ahead, please.
Thanks. Thanks, Tom. I really like the mission statement. I think it captures what we're trying to do really well and hits on key points. I think I would add to your point on affordability. I think that by including affordable parking in the mission statement now suggests that the way to provide equitable access and maybe affordable parking to folks is to make parking low cost across the board, right? And I think what we're really trying to do is address what are those parking needs, whether it be accessible parking in certain locations or perhaps subsidized parking in cases where we need it, but not affordable housing just across the board. So I think that's a good point there. I think the only thing that I would raise a question about is adding mobility to the name. I think just sort of walking through the mission and what you're talking about here, I don't think there's really a lot of mobility in the mission. And I think to your point about parking supply and demand and trying to capture supply and demand with the word mobility, I think we could probably do that simply by calling it the parking management division. And I think that gets at a lot of what we're talking about. So that's maybe an option to consider. The keywords that seem to be coming up in the mission are management and access. So I think that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Okay.
Other than that, yeah, thanks.
There was another policymaker that actually wanted to drop the word parking and just call it the mobility division. So
I think maybe this is unique for Madison. I'm not sure, but I think since the parking division is already falling under DOT, adding mobility there is doing a lot of work that doesn't make sense, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Baltazar, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tom, for the presentation. I think my comment is going to be on the whole, making parking accessible to our, for folks in downtown, and we want to bring folks, and and this is why I like being part of this group, because we can talk about this. We want to bring folks into downtown, into the community. But yet, we know parking is very, very expensive, and I'll just share. And I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but Tam, let me know if I am not doing the correct stuff. So Latino Academy, we just moved into downtown, and because we want to bring more, students into the downtown area. We want them to come not just for to pay a ticket, but we want them to come in and learn and gain skills there. Unfortunately, the majority of our classes have to happen after 6 p.m. because of parking, because of that situation. And I didn't know that parking the whole day was like $8. And it is. I'm looking into it. Like now I know why we are not there. I went to the theater last Saturday and we pay $8 just for parking, and it's not expensive in comparison to other cities, but definitely, prevents folks, who to be able to come and enjoy things, and it really put us in disadvantage. So, I don't have the magic wand to try to figure out, because you are poor, we'll give you that extra stuff, or because you don't have the resources, it's just like putting another mark, because I'm poor, I get this for free. I don't know. Anyway, so I totally support that. We need to make that, affordable to, I don't know if it's to everybody. Obviously, we need to bring revenue, or different ways of, supporting folks who want to enjoy the downtown area.
Yeah, actually, the rates you just quoted were low. If you went during a weekday, you'd pay $14. Then there's an $8 max on the nights and the weekends, right? So so that is a factor. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Baltazar. Carolyn, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Thanks. I'm excited about the updated mission, and I don't have a lot to say about the name, but I have a question about what falls under management and whether you think that the data collection and technology and maybe ITS, intelligent transportation systems, and maybe information communication technologies, whether those might even be related to this. And if they are, if they fall under management, and if that one word captures all of it, or if you kind of like the idea of signaling, that parking can be this kind of cool platform for introducing some of these, technologies and behavioral kind of economic tools.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a kind of a curiosity.
Yeah, a lot of our ITS work is done through our traffic engineering division.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that probably will remain there. However, smart transfer or parking systems, would fall into the parking division. Like, for instance, those super special loading zones that change color, that they have variable curb management zones, right? That could be loading during the day and parking at night or whatever. That would fall under the parking division, but connected vehicles, vehicle tracking and the like, that's falls pretty squarely in traffic engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So based on that comment, are you you're saying management would be appropriate or doesn't need to be there?
I think it depends on what you want to signal with the mission and sort of this recruiting. I like that idea that sort of the intention to recruit, but I can't imagine what you might have in your minds about really what you want this group to be. How they want to focus. If they're kind of a new technology, like obviously the autonomous vehicles and ITS, like there's a lot of that in operations and traffic control, right? Certainly.
Yeah.
But this is sort of like the smart city land use part of the equation. So parking could potentially do a whole lot, to be dynamic or et cetera. So if you wanted to signal it, then maybe it should be called out in the mission. But if you think that it can be called out in other ways, or if management addresses it sufficiently, if you don't want to commit too much to that, then
okay, maybe I'll think about that. I think this industry is kind of a strange industry in that you kind of have one side of the spectrum where I just read an article in a parking magazine. Now I'm reading those now that Sabrina's gone.
that's awesome.
Yeah, and the article says, the parking business is going gangbusters because people are going to use their cars more than ever, and we can help them do that. And that's not really the mindset of the candidate that we want to attract, right? I think the idea is we want to provide access to our businesses, and maybe address some of those things that Baltazar said too. But we want to be part of the infrastructure that moves us towards reduced VMT, right? And so when we put out this announcement for our parking division manager, it'll be clear that we're on one side of the spectrum, not the other side of the spectrum, because there's plenty of professionals in the other side of the spectrum. Okay. So the two comments that I actually, there's three comments that I've gotten. Baltazar made a very good comment about affordability, and how that keeps certain populations from coming downtown, right? Chris made a comment regarding mobility, and does that really, is it really needed? I'm just going to say, is it really needed? And then, Carolyn, you said, well, if you are moving into technology, maybe make sure that somehow, is there a way that you might want that reflected in the mission statement? Did that capture what you said? Okay.
I think so. Good.
Okay. Okay. If we don't put mobility in the name change, then all of a sudden this becomes very easy. Good. So I think I've gotten feedback. Appreciate that.
Tom, were you just looking for feedback, or were you looking for something more formal right now? Or
You could provide something more formal. I don't think I need anything more formal, but okay. I want to empower the board, right? The mission of the board is to develop transportation policy. And so if you would like to do a resolution that maybe solidifies your position, I'm very open to that.
Okay, well, we don't need one, but if somebody feels very strongly would like to make a motion, they're welcome to do that. Otherwise, we will move on. Chris?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that the board, I don't know, supports the proposed mission of the parking division.
Would also include the name change?
Can we be different on the name change?
Sure. Okay, then the motion is as you said. Is there a second? Second by Carolyn, thank you. Any discussion? Chris, did you want to speak to your motion?
No, as I said, I think it strikes the right balance in what we're actually trying to do with the parking division in the broader scheme of the DOT and the city's policy goals. I think it's a good move.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, then on Chris's motion to approve the changes to the parking division's mission statement, all those in favor, please unmute yourselves and say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Any abstentions? Seeing none, that will go down as unanimous. Thank you. Next item then is Legistar 70116, reviewing the Beltline PEL survey and update.
Yeah, so the Wisconsin DOT is reinitiating their Beltline planning and environmental linkages study, and they've sent out a survey of what types of improvements would be a priority to stakeholders. And there's a policy committee meeting, which I believe, Tom, you were on it, as well as Alder McKinney and Alder Furman.
Margaret's on there.
And yeah, perhaps Margaret is as well. And I think there's been a little bit of some people on the committees might not know the breadth of all the issues of the different crossings and the like. And so what we did is we put together kind of a staff recommendation sheet, maybe as guidance for people who are on the policy committee. I'm going to share first a brief summary. By the way, Randy, this the Madison or WSDOT Southwest region has multiple members on this Beltline committee, and this does affect Fitchburg pretty considerably. Are you on the committee or someone from Fitchburg on there?
Alder Gabriella Gerhardt is the primary, and I'm the alternate. And she should be attending the meetings, and according to my conversations I've had with her in council, yes.
Okay.
She's been attending. So, as I asked her if she's not, then I would like to be there. So.
Okay. All right.
Are you suggesting that as an alternate I should be there as well?
No, I'm not saying.
Oh, okay. No.
I'm just saying that this.
Yeah.
I'm just updating you on this project, and it affects Madison considerably, but I think it affects Fitchburg.
It does.
Too.
Yeah. Thank you. For
Yeah.
keeping me in mind.
I'm going to share a summary. I think the DOT has given this presentation. I asked if they would give it here, but they didn't feel comfortable on short notice, and so I made an abbreviated copy of this.
I'll get a link to the presentation, Tom, and send it so you can get it attached to what you
Yeah. So I'm going to be basically the Beltline Pell has a series of objectives. I feel like for the DOT, this is relatively progressive. You know, many DOTs are focused solely on auto travel. And while this project does concern itself considerably with auto travel, it does have a fair amount of options that deal with alternate modes of travel. So directly, it says some of the objectives say support infrastructure and other measures that encourage alternatives to single occupancy vehicle travel. Other objectives include address system mobility for all travel modes, improve connections across and adjacent to the Beltline for all travel modes, enhance efficient regional multimodal access to Madison, enhance transit ridership and routing opportunities, improve pedestrian and bicycle accommodations, and complement other major transportation initiatives and studies in the Madison area. So while these are not all of the Pell objectives, there are some Pell objectives that one might say are sustainability oriented. Pell objective 3 considers mobility, address system mobility for all travel modes. And then more in line with the traditional DOT objectives is remedy recurring mainline congestion that results in speed differences and potential safety concerns. What they've done is they've developed a kind of a series of priority concepts where we have objectives, you get stakeholder screening, look at the different concepts, and then kind of prioritize which concepts have the most promise or maybe are most favored. And then from that, they will develop strategy packages. So the next step is the strategy packages. So where is this in the big picture? This is right here. This is the planning and environmental linkages. It's kind of a precursor to an environmental impact statement. So the DOT will eventually do an environmental impact statement for the Beltline. And it will likely have multiple documents. But the alternatives that they look at in the environmental assessments and environmental impact statements will largely probably be the alternatives that are being proposed in the PEL, or the planning and environmental linkages. Quickly, the types of things they are looking at, I'm sorry, this is going so quickly, are roadway connections across the Beltline. Okay. bicycle and pedestrian connections across and along the Beltline. I'm just going to use the page down. These give examples of that. And then park and rides, and this shows different locations for park and rides. Where should transit priority be? And the mainline component concepts. So the mainline component concepts start with the Beltline flex lane as a base. Now, are most people on this on the board familiar with the Beltline flex lane? Yeah. So basically, what they are doing is, rather than expanding the Beltline and adding a lane, they are going to instead use a shoulder, the inside shoulder, as a travel lane during the rush hours. And this will go from basically Whitney Way east to the interstate. So while this does add peak hour capacity, one might say it uses existing infrastructure to provide that capacity. So it's perhaps less impactful from an environmental standpoint. However, it still does provide that capacity. And then what they do is they have different iterations of improvements to the Beltline. So the base is just adding the flex lane basically from Whitney Way, Verona Road to the interstate. The next one is to add weaving improvements. The next one is to extend the flex lane all the way through to Middleton. Fourth one is to extend the flex lane with weave improvements. The fifth one is to have the flex lane and add a general purpose lane, basically from Whitney Way, Verona Road through Middleton. Because that section right now has a smaller cross section than the section from Verona Road east. Add a general purpose lane throughout the Beltline and keep the flex lane with weave improvements. So those are the basic options. And then they have interchange component concepts, and basically asking which interchanges are warrant further investigation. So in response to that, we put together a memo that was in Legistar that that provides staff's recommendations. And the reason why we prepared this memo is because many members on the policy committee might not have the full background for different parts of the study, and understand that there are some of these things that are already incorporated in city plans. So kind of the guiding principles for the staff recommendations include sustainability. How can we make our transportation system more sustainable? Reducing vehicle miles traveled. And there's various plans that advocate that within the city of Madison. And ways to do that include providing alternate accommodations for alternate modes. Safety. The city places a high value on safety, as described in the Vision Zero Action Plan. Safeguarding vulnerable transportation users, such as pedestrians and cyclists, is a priority. And then connections. Many adopted neighborhood and special area plans include connections for areas separated by historic transportation improvements, meaning the Beltline. A good example is, I'm just going to say, like Post Road, which is kind of part in Fitchburg, right, and part in Madison. But Post Road is pretty isolated and it's pretty hard to get to. You have to kind of get there through the fish hatchery interchange or whatever. So it's so are there ways to reconnect some of these communities that were separated from the Beltline when it was so this is the roadway crossings of the Beltline that was contained in the survey. The DOT provided ranking in the survey, and they basically asked if the city of Madison or survey respondents agreed with that. And we actually have a little bit different ranking than they do for grade separated crossings of the Beltline. Our ranking would be first staff's ranking, I should say, would be Perry Street. The Perry Street crossing was just recently adopted in the 2022 South Madison plan recommended. Reasons for that is it really connects the community of color, which is north of the Beltline, to a substantial employment district south of the Beltline. If you think of the Greenway Cross, there's a lot of employment there in Greenway Cross. And then another reason is that Greenway Cross employment area is kind of a strange place in that, if you think about it, north of it, it's the Beltline, and east of it is Highway 14. And so it's almost like a big employment cul-de-sac. It's not very connected. And so having another access to that area would provide value. The second would be west of Whitney Way, perhaps in the extension of the Tokay Watts Road. This connection is recommended in the 2022 Odana Area Plan, which is interesting. Both of these plans were adopted just this year, that we have them that fresh. It would provide a more direct pedestrian, bike, and motor vehicle connection of residents south of the Beltline to employment opportunities north of the Beltline. And then it also connects two separated employment areas, university research park businesses such as Exact Sciences. Right now, Exact Sciences had made I'm just using them as an example, but they've made a huge infrastructure investment on the north side in University Research Park. And they've also made a huge investment on the south side of the Beltline. And a lot of these jobs are just, good working wage jobs. These are the type of jobs that we want to have access. And yet their campus is somewhat disconnected because, you have to go through an interchange. A third would be perhaps the Stewart Street, perhaps as an alternate to the Perry Street grade separation. It would just provide another connection into the Greenway Cross area. And then A and B, Walmart to Westtown and Struck to Grand Canyon. Both of these connections are recommended in the adopted 2022 Odana Area Plan, and they have some value in relieving the Gammon Road interchange. Care should be taken not to diminish the existing pedestrian bicycle facilities at Connection B. So that's how staff, I think maybe there's value in discussing each of the components separately. Staff kind of feels like these are if the priorities that we would convey to the DOT. Are there people on the policy board, the planning policy board, that have other ideas, or is this useful information?
Any questions or feedback? Margaret, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that on a whole, these are useful suggestions. They fit, as you said, with the area plans that we are very fresh in our minds. And it also fits with what I know of, a plan that some of the newer members of the board might not be familiar with, which was, the earlier iteration of, Beltline study, where there was discussion about how much of Beltline traffic is actually not really through traffic. It's, hop on at one entrance and get off a couple of interchanges down. So I think most of these connectors that or cross connections that you're talking about, I think speak directly or indirectly to that issue, and have the potential to relieve, at least if the earlier research is to be believed, there's a potential here to relieve congestion, relieve some stress on the Beltline and its connecting roads by punching those connections through. So I like it. I would support this. I'm glad the staff put this together.
Thank you, Margaret. Any further questions? Comments on staff recommendations? All right, go ahead, Tom. Thank you.
Okay. Then the survey asks about pedestrian bicycle connections. And, these were the connections that were developed, 5 or 6 years ago. I remember them. And WisDOT provided the following ranking. We got the staff together, and this is the staff kind of felt like the first one maybe would be the Westtown Path to High Point, which is over here. We have a long-term plan to connect the Beltline Path with facilities that extend to Junction Road, and the recently constructed Gammon Road underpass is part of that long-term plan. The Westtown Path to High Point is the next section, and we've included it in our funding request for TAP. If the DOT could help us with that, that would be great. Particularly because we are having a little bit of challenges with obtaining all the right-of-way needed. And then the next one would be the Whitney Way Crossing. And this is actually a little bit newer, but traffic engineering and the Safe Streets program will be putting in a cycle track on the east side of Whitney Way on Odana Road. So we'll have a cycle track on the north side of the Odana Golf Course. And just last year, we have bike lanes installed on Odana Road west of Whitney Way. The problem is, if you're on bike, you have to cross Whitney Way. And, that's really quite a zoo. And particularly, I'm just going to say in the mornings, if you've been near the interchange in the mornings, everyone's late to work, everyone's rushing, everyone's taking a right turn on red off the interchange. And it's very challenging. And so we thought, that would, a grade separated crossing there could be a very nice enhancement. The next would be A or B, Beltline crossings north or south of Old Sauk Road. The idea there is engineering has put some bikeways improvements into the capital budget with the intent of putting bikeways in a lot of these stormwater improvements. There's going to be a series of stormwater and ditch improvements on the west side. And Chris Pedikowski said, if we're in there already with grading equipment, why don't we put, paths to follow these waterways? And then, and so bridges, north or south of Old Sauk would be good. E is a Beltline path, the southwest path, which basically is right here. Connecting. Basically, this might connect the southwest path to the Cannonball, or help with that. And then G, Seminole to the Cannonball path. One thing that we did add is Monona Drive to Stoughton Road, which is right here, which is J. And I'm going to say this one's in honor of our old city engineer, Larry Nelson. This was his idea. So that's how far back it goes. But he felt like it's somewhat challenging for a cyclist to get from Monona Drive across to Stoughton Road, and this might be an opportunity to do that on the south side of the Beltline within DOT right away. So, on that note, any thoughts or comments on these connections?
Not seeing any hands up, but I'll echo what Margaret said earlier. That I certainly find them useful. Having yet to take the survey myself, I was waiting for this presentation. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm just noticing that the crossing recommendations include this west, number D, the west of Park Street. And then the bike ped connection does not include the same. Yeah. How do those play off of each other?
I think I put right here, crossing C or H are probably not needed if road grade separated crossings are provided. But perhaps rather than having this at the bottom, maybe it should be put at the top. Maybe we could say that crossing C and H are important, yet are probably not needed if grade separated crossings are provided. Would that perhaps increase its influence?
Yeah, maybe. That makes a little more sense to me.
Okay, I hope you don't mind me. All right, I'll move that up. Any other thoughts on this?
No, thanks.
All right, good. Okay, park and ride concepts are right here, and they show all these different ones. They prioritize D and E. We have a slightly different prioritization. We state while carpooling is supported, often VMT benefit derived from parking is not commensurate with the infrastructure cost. For example, a $15,000 parking space may take one trip off the road. That investment might have greater effects with other initiatives. To the extent possible, using parking that is available off-peak is preferred. Park and ride lots that directly connect with transit or a path that connect to employment are also preferred. And so then we basically prioritize B since it'll be right there by our BRT lot. And then we go to E. And the reason for E, Randy, is because we anticipate that the north-south BRT will probably be right there at Fish Hatchery Road near the station. Then we might move to A. A is up here because there's the opportunity to have a parking right here, and we will have relatively good bus service to that location. Maybe BRT light, if you know what I mean. And then D, which is near the southwest path and the Cannonball path. That being said, D is pretty far away from employment on a bike. that's downtown. And probably what would occur would be a person driving and parking and getting on their bike might choose to drive in a little bit closer than D, because it might be like up to 7 miles from D to downtown employment districts. Thoughts on this?
Chris, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I completely agree with your idea of stressing the ones near transit. Is there, I guess the main thinking behind this is that folks would carpool if it wasn't near transit and if it was that far out. Is there any precedent for that really happening currently?
Well, yeah, there is. It's I think maybe an example might be there's a park and ride lot near Sauk City, right, where people will park and they'll come in, and that park and ride can be it can be relatively full, up to 3/4 full. I think there's also a park and ride lot near Sun Prairie, kind of in the American Center, and that I don't know the occupancy directly, but I think maybe 50 to 3/4 full. So they are used, but if you get 75 cars in a park and ride lot, you've taken away 75 trips.
Yeah, that was my thinking. And I mean, to your point, that's a lot of money to get a couple cars off the road. So, yeah, thanks.
Carolyn, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I have a question about these park and rides, and I'm wondering, maybe somebody here can help me understand it. Okay, so I get it. The park and rides are located sort of at the edge, right? And here on this map, they're like kind of on the far side of Beltline, approaching, sort of not making these trips into a core area. But is there any benefit to co-locating these park and rides with other activities so that people can do other activities or trip chain, or kind of be close to an employment center, be close to some shopping, be close to other things, so that park and ride is like a multifunctional situation?
One of the things that was discussed by actually Dan McAuliffe is that, like Seattle, they rent a lot of park and ride facilities. And so an example of that might be, the High Point Cinema. They have a structured parking that they need at night, but they don't really need during the day, right? And so there could be opportunities like that. And we tried to capture that with this.
Okay.
That being said, this concept, maybe I'm going to just say, maybe this should be more explicit in the discussion. And this concept is probably foreign to the Wisconsin DOT. I don't believe they've done this anywhere in the state, but other states will do this. Yeah.
Margaret, go ahead, please.
Yeah, actually, I'll start by asking a clarifying question of Tom. What is it about this plan that would be novel for the DOT that's done in other states? I missed your point.
Oh, yeah. I think what Carolyn was saying, and Chris might have also said this, is that rather than building new parking, right, could we use parking that's already available?
Right.
And
okay.
For this function. And an example might be the High Point, cinema, or East Town parking or something like that,
Yeah, got it now. Question about park and ride G on 51 in Single Cow.
Yeah.
So it looks like that's intended to serve the bike path? And then would it be the intention to keep the park and ride at Dutch Mill Corners that already exists?
Yeah, that park and ride will stay at Dutch Mill, and it's pretty well used, and it's used for a lot of different people. You know, there's
Yeah, it's quite crowded most of the time.
yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why I raised it, because I think at various times it's been floated to potentially, just what should we do with that lot? I mean, it's used by the intercity buses, but it's also used for some carpooling and whatnot. And we have some bus service to it, but not terrific bus service to it. It's pretty long and winding, at least at this point. But I think that at various times we've raised the idea of structured parking there to make better use of that space, since we know it's in demand. And then I had a question for you about, obviously we're talking here about the South Beltline. So this is kind of a little bit far afield, but our park and ride up by Sun Prairie for bus connected with the Sun Prairie Express bus service. How is that being utilized at this point? Do we know?
Well, the endpoint of the BRT, or at least a half of the endpoint of the BRT, is going to be at the Sun Prairie's park and ride there, right? Mm-hmm. The park and ride in the American Center, I can't remember if the BRT goes by it or not. I
don't think so. But it's currently served by like Route 25, I think is what people are grabbing. But
yeah, I don't know. I should do that. Route 25, parking. Right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it might be worth double checking some of these with the van pool folks, because, for example, the lot that you mentioned up by Sauk City, I mean, one of the reasons that's well utilized is it's a drop and pickup point for the state van pool.
Yeah, actually, the van pools, it's in a strange place right now, in that it's not operating, and hasn't for about 2 years.
Okay.
So I don't know how the state eventually. They probably will reinitiate service, but like the drivers that we would have contacted 2 years ago, probably, So I can see we could look into.
Yeah, because state offices are opening if they haven't already opened. So, but it's certainly part of the long-term build out. So, yeah. Okay. Those are my questions.
Yeah, can I, I'm just to make sure that I got them correctly, I like to repeat them so that it helps me. Mm-hmm. Your question is, one is the park and ride in the American Center, and more of a question on how does the transit network redesign affect that? Are people going to be able to pick up the bus there? Then you had a question regarding, Dutch Mill and the capacity of it. And so I'm going to say that Dutch Mill is a success story. It's being used, and it's being used in a lot of different ways. And then you had questions regarding the van pool, and would any of these be used by the van pool?
Yeah. Well, and actually, my first question was about the Sun Prairie Park and Ride, just how well that's doing at this point. And you had a good question about the American Center as well.
Yeah.
And of course, we know that there are a number of areas in the city that are being used as park and ride for all intents and purposes, right?
Yeah. And that's think that's a adaptive use of existing infrastructure. You know.
I have no problem with it.
Okay, thank you. Randy, go ahead, please.
Tom, what is the difference again? If you said, I forget, the stars, 2 are red and the others are purple. What's the difference?
I'm not quite sure why some are red and the rest are purple. So I don't know.
I asked one because the red are in my district and the purple's not, but it's in Pittsburgh. So, okay. If there's a difference in significance or priority.
There might be, but this graphic was obtained from the DOT. And Tom, you were at the meeting where this was presented. Do you recall why?
Yeah, I don't. I was going to look back at the PowerPoint presentation or at the actual recording and find out. I can find out though, and then let the board know or send out a one-way email.
If you would, Tom, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Tom, looks like you can continue then.
Then it talks about transit priority. We've talked with Metro Transit on this, and they're probably most apt to provide the most educated recommendation because they know their route structure. Their priority is maybe Mineral Point Road, because of the BRT. Fish Hatchery Road because of the future BRT, University Avenue because that's a pretty important connection in the transit network redesign. Whitney Way, again, pretty important in the transit network redesign. Then the remainder probably all have similar priority because they have one route that passes through them, not multiple routes that pass through them. Crossing I is not needed, which is Park Street, because we don't have any routes that pass through the Park Street interchange. And right now they have it as the third priority. So no real need for it there. So I'm going to move on to Beltline Improvements. Is that okay? This is and the board may actually want to talk about this. WisDOT will be installing a flex lane from Whitney Way to the interstate in 2022. The lane will provide an additional lane of capacity during morning and evening rush hour. WisDOT then presents different levels of improvement and capacity expansion and asks how supportive the survey taker is of the improvement. From not at all to extremely supportive. The following summarizes the basic alternatives by WisDOT. And then rather than rank these, well, actually, here you can see the improvement, which basically goes from, very little capacity to quite a bit of capacity. And then this column shows the number of level service sections. And then there's a comment there. And then rather than rate the supportiveness that the staff felt for every one of these, we thought maybe we would provide a general comment. And the general comment is that staff feel that additional capacity improvements are not yet justified on the Beltline. Post-pandemic volumes are still roughly 90 to 92% of those experienced in 2019. The increase in teleworking may delay the return to 2019 volumes, with 2050 traffic less than those indicated in the 2050 traffic projections. So saying, well, this is more of a wait and see. You're going to be providing additional capacity with the flex lane, and our volumes are not increasing right now. Maybe we should just mark time rather than plan the next expansion. In the event that Beltline improvements are warranted, improvements that maximize existing infrastructure without adding pavement capacity are preferred. Flex lane and weaving improvements fit into this category. So that's how we left it. Thoughts on that?
Chris, go ahead, please.
I think that's a great recommendation. I think, if I remember correctly, this board voted symbolically, at least, not to support the flex lanes. And I think part of the thinking at the time was that if we're going to go that route, there ought to at least be considerations for transportation demand management, HOV lanes or something else besides new capacity. So that might be the plan B recommendation, is that at least that stuff shouldn't be added without thinking through those considerations. But I think I think that your position is probably the right one.
Okay, so I think you make a good point, man.
And I guess the reason I might add a contingency is is there I forget the whole impetus for this, but there's going to be construction happening that, Wisdom might say now's the time, right? Or not? No, I guess not. The flex lanes are a short-term quick fix solution, right?
Well, basically, the flex lanes were like a $40 million solution instead of a $300 million solution, right? And so, so it was and if you think about it, if you have $300 million to invest, how would you want to invest it? Could that money be used better in other places? So I guess I was involved in the consultant project team that kind of came up with this, and as part of that team, we kind of felt like it was perhaps less impactful if you were going to provide more peak hour mobility to just use what you have rather than add pavement, reconstruct bridges, reconstruct everything, right? So, but you're saying that we should weave TDM measures into this, Yeah. And at one time, I think the flex lane, there was some thought that could be an HOV lane, but I think it didn't go that way. So,
thanks.
Any other thoughts on this? Nope.
Not seeing any hands.
Okay. So Beltline interchanges, and literally the Beltline project study has been going on in one form or another since 1998. It's been around a long time. And so there have been some incremental improvements. And in many ways, interchanges, while maybe we don't necessarily support capacity expansion on the Beltline, interchanges are basically our residents going through and getting to their neighborhoods and to their stores, right? And so if you think about it, the Beltline poses a barrier, and the barrier it poses are basically the interchanges. And so sometimes if an interchange is congested, it just makes mobility harder for our residents that don't want to do anything on the Beltline. They just have to get to the other side, right? So as a staff, I don't think we're necessarily categorically against interchange improvements. If we can improve our connectivity, and also our interchanges are perhaps one of the most vulnerable places for bicycles and pedestrians that go through the interchange. You know, you think about all the multiple movements that are going on through right turn lanes, left turns, all that. It's very difficult, and you would probably be unlikely to send, let's say, your 11-year-old child to something that's on the other side of the Beltline, right? You'd say, stay on this side on your bike, don't go on the other side. So if we could make those interchanges better, there could be value. We said that the following interchanges may warrant study for improvements, both motor vehicle and pedestrian bicycle. One is the Whitney Way. The Schrader Road braided ramp is confusing, problematic for cyclists as well as motor vehicles. Whitney Way, many bus routes go through the Whitney Way interchange, and so congestion through that interchange is experienced by our transit system. Gammon Road, the interchange has poor operations and has limited to no pedestrian bicycle accommodations. The DOT was looking at a diverging diamond there. It might hold promise, it might not. And then Stoughton Road. Stoughton Road is just very difficult, not so much at the interchange, but just north of the interchange on Broadway. It's, on a cyclist, I mean, you have to cross a sea of pavement. It's just very difficult. You're in a really almost a freeway type of environment, and it's just not great. And then we also put, interchanges that do not have adequate pedestrian and bicycle accommodations are also candidates for improvement. Examples include, but are not limited to, Woolsack Road, Gammon Road, Remark Road, and West Broadway. So, thoughts on this, or do you feel like we're? I think staff is feeling like with the flex lane, it's more appropriate to focus on crossings and the interchanges rather than on Beltline capacity.
As I think you maybe indicated earlier, when we did have the discussion and symbolic vote, or maybe Chris brought it up about the flex lane. That it's my recollection is that was the core of our discussion was focusing monies that are available on crossings, ped bike improvements, other safety things, and kind of pushing capacity expansion to sort of like last priority. If others remember differently, feel free to chime in. Just to circle back, Randy, to your question, I did get the answer to what the difference in the red and the purple stars are for the park and ride components. Red stars were recommended in something called the Southwest Region Park and Ride System Study. I'm not familiar with that study, but that's at least the simple answer to your question. All right, any further comments on what Tom and staff put together here for this Beltline PEL? Okay. Go ahead, Tom. I see Chris's hand up, but go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, one more big picture question here, or comment or whatever. So I know you're gonna in this memo is gonna stress the city's focus on safety. WSDOT in dealing with highways is typically used thinking about safety in terms of like merge movements and stuff. There was an article not too long ago about in a few hours, MPD pulled over 30-something folks speeding at 75 miles per hour, I think. Is this on WSDOT's radar at all in terms of thinking of safety, in terms of speed?
Well, it is, and they actually have sophisticated safety models. You know, the IHSTM, which you probably are familiar with, I think, and probably one thing that they will use to justify capacity improvements will be safety, right? Because the number of rear end crashes on the Beltline is just enormous. You know, it's just enormous, and I think the crash rate on the Beltline is 3 to 5 times more than most freeways or something like that. So when we say safety at the front of this document, you know, we are thinking pedestrian, bike, and vulnerable users. DOT might be thinking, you know, motor vehicle users. I'm not sure if that's wrong, though. You know, like a life is a life. You know, and you know, someone that loses their father on the Beltline versus on a bike, it's still a life. And so, you know, I'd prefer that the safety connotation in the context of a freeway not be interpreted as saying let's do capacity expansion, but you know, yeah, you know, we all know people that, or many of us probably know people that have gotten hurt on the Beltline or have died on the Beltline. So, and it, you know, and I'm going to also say that, and this is going to sound a little bit different, but the Beltline actually connects a lot of communities of color. You know, and and so like if you're on Park Street and you need to go to Allied Drive, it's really hard to get there without going on the Beltline. You know what I mean? And it's because a lot of our communities of color are more not in our downtown areas or are near east and west sides, but they're on the periphery. And so some ways, the Beltline affects a lot of commuters, but in some ways the Beltline also connects communities of color that have cars. And so it's okay to be concerned about safety, I think, on the Beltline, I think, you know.
So maybe, I don't know if it matters, but it might be worth pointing out that the city of Madison's approach to safety stresses speed management, and that the Beltline is one of our where we see most of our, or a large number of our speeding offenses.
Well, that's a interesting thing. Okay. Okay. So on that note, I was thinking, because we probably have to wrap this up, maybe what I could do is I could take some of the suggestions that I've heard, change this document very small in small areas, but here and there, and I'll repost it to Legistar. I'll just call it revised staff recommendations or something like that. And just so we capture these thoughts, those of you who are on the policy board committee or for WSDOT may want to use this. And then we as a city, maybe through the mayor's office or maybe through staff, might send this communication to WSDOT as well. Any thoughts or comments?
I think we definitely should send it in some way. I'm certainly going to, be referring to it when I finalize my survey and my comments. I think it would be very valuable to send this.
Okay.
I know the folks that are working on this and working on the outreach. While they have their own ideas, they seem to be more open than I expected to being influenced by the folks that are participating in this, to suggestions. So that's a promising thing.
Okay, good.
All right. Any further comments or questions, discussion for this? Why don't we get a motion to approve this survey update and recommendations? I think that would be in order. If anyone feels like making one, of course we don't need to. Okay, if we're not going to have, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, we might as well. So yeah, move to accept this report and the recommendations, I think is the correct motion.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Is there a second? Second by Randy, thank you. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please unmute yourselves and say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Any abstentions? Chair believes it's unanimous. If you'd like to register a no vote, please raise your hand. All right, then we'll go on to unanimous. Thank you. I do think it's important that we formally, sort of approve the staff position, particularly if it's going to be sent to the DOT. It gives it some extra validity. So appreciate that. That is all we have for the evening. So I would entertain motions to adjourn. Looks like a motion by Chris. Is there a second?
Randy.
Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning for the evening, please unmute yourselves and say aye.
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 Opposed, no.
Aye.
That appears to be unanimous. Good night, everyone. Thank you.